I awoke abruptly and looked at the clock. It was almost 10 in the morning. How could I possibly have overslept? And why hadn't Anne woken me up? We were supposed to leave for the airport at 8 o'clock. I rushed down the stairs, opened the door to Anne's bedroom, and screamed at what I saw. My friend lay in her bed. The sheets turned red, soaked with her blood, and the handle of our huge paring knife reflected the rays of sunlight. The police arrived within 15 minutes. The investigator scrutinized every detail of the previous night. It was going pretty much as usual. I came home from work. I'm a taxi driver, and my last passenger was our neighbor, Archie. We talked a lot along the way. He told me about an unfortunate incident. It turned out that his house got robbed a week ago, and he was complaining that before the losses due to this theft, he had spent a bunch of money to get a security camera installed. I dropped Archie off at his house nearby and came home myself. Anne was waiting for me. She was depressed, just as she had been for the last few months because of her ill-fated love affair. I tried to cheer her up by telling her about the wonderful seaside vacation that awaited us. Anne cheered up a little, and we finished packing our bags laughing together. We got to bed early because we had a flight in the morning. However, I was tired. I didn't notice that I did not plug the charger in tightly enough. My phone's battery ran out of juice during the night, and the alarm clock didn't go off, and Anne herself didn't wake up at all. The investigator, looking intently into my eyes, informed me that I was a suspect in the murder, and I had to sign a recognizance not to leave. It was my worst morning ever.
No.
I had lost my friend and was one step away from the prison bars. I don't know how I came up with this idea, but I decided to start my own investigation. Who hated Anne enough to want her dead? Perhaps her ex-husband, Stuart. After they split up, she moved in with me. They divorced recently, and Anne's cheating was the reason. Stu had changed a lot during the years of their married life. From a young, talented engineer to a resentful car mechanic who would fall asleep in front of the TV every night surrounded by empty beer cans. So when Anne happened to meet her high school crush, Paul, 6 months ago, she couldn't resist. Paul was so full of lust for life and plans for his career, enthusiastically telling about his achievements and incredible travels. Besides, the former couple really had a lot to remember together. They hadn't seen each other for almost 10 years. Paul threw Anne romantic surprises, presented her with jewelry, and showered her with compliments she hadn't heard from her husband for years. When Stuart caught Anne cheating, there was a huge scandal. Of course, my friend had cheated, but she didn't deserve to be beaten. And that's exactly what Stuart did to her. She packed up and moved in with me. Stuart called all her friends to find Anne. One day he even came over to my place, but I kept Anne's secret and said I don't know where she is. But things weren't working out with Paul either. He didn't want to leave his children and his wife. Paul spoke enticingly to my friend about their future together. But when she asked about his possible divorce, Paul went nuts. The kids are too young, his wife doesn't know about anything. He's not ready to lose his family. Turns out that Anne was just an affair for Paul. Anne threatened to go to Paul's wife and tell her everything. Paul became furious and yelled that he would get Anne to shut up forever. Even after that, Anne was not strong enough to break up with Paul, and they kept seeing each other. All these events had a significant impact on Anne. She was literally crushed. So she started to look for consolation in new acquaintances online. Now, could the killer be one of her social networking fans? I remembered that Anne had jokingly forwarded me messages from one of the guys who seemed quite pushy. I started Anne's laptop. 15 messages from a man named Tom within the last 2 days. In those messages, Tom kept asking Anne to meet, inviting her to his place, and acting rather sweet. But his persistence seemed kind of obsessive. Thus, I had at least 3 suspects. My friend's infuriated ex-husband Stuart, her lover Paul, who had lately preferred to shrug off Anne's attentions, and new pushy guy Tom. I had to check out all these suspects to clear the suspicions. I wrote to Tom on Anne's behalf and invited him to come over for a meeting. If he won't answer, he's 100% behind the murder. I mean, he didn't know any one of Anne's friends, and she couldn't have told him she was dead. And then I remembered that the night before she was killed, Anne was going to meet her friend Holly. What if she knows something I don't? I headed off to meet Holly. She was a friend of ours with Anne and Stuart. Holly said she was sure Stu killed his wife. When I asked why, she told me that Stuart had already been in trouble with the law when he was a student before he met Anne. Holly kept this secret for a long time, as she believed that he had learned this lesson for life. But now she wasn't so sure. That time the girl Stu was dating had cheated on him with someone else. One day he took his father's gun and waited for her outside her house. And when he saw her with another guy, he shot. Luckily he didn't hit anyone. Then he begged the couple not to file a police report, and that's how the matter got settled. Oh my gosh. I decided to go to Stu's and try to find some evidence. Stuart's sister Penny opened the door, a spectacular blonde woman with long hair. Penny hated Anne. And not just because she'd cheated on her brother. She and Anne had a conflict. My friend received precious diamonds as a wedding gift from her now-deceased mother-in-law. Those diamonds were passed down in her family from a daughter-in-law to a daughter-in-law, and in Penny's opinion, they should stay within the family and belong to her, especially after the divorce. Penny reported that 3 days before Anne's death, Stuart ended up in the hospital for appendicitis. The surgery was highly complicated, and he's still in the ICU. It is an airtight alibi. This leaves us with only 2 more suspects. I drove back home totally frustrated. All I managed to do was cross Stu off my list of potential murderers and nothing more. I have to find out who killed Anne. I don't want to suffer for someone else's crime. That's when I saw Archie through the car window. I hadn't seen him since the day he told me about the burglaries and the security cameras at his house. I immediately pulled up right next to him and asked about them. Archie said that the cameras were facing the street. We quickly headed into his house to watch the footage. Archie and I watched over every second of the night Anne got murdered. And we saw a woman approaching my house. A blonde woman striding determinedly toward my front yard, but there wasn't enough of the camera's angle to catch her face. Could it be Stu's sister Penny? Maybe it's Paul's wife. But what does she look like? Paul's social media profile was full of family photos. 2 lovely boys and his wife Meryl. A gorgeous blonde with blue eyes and a gentle gaze. She seemed to represent the ideal housewife and keeper of the hearth. Could she have gotten back at her rival so ruthlessly? How do I find her? In one of the photos with the caption, "Our Family Nest," I saw a familiar neighborhood. My job as a taxi driver was not for nothing. I recognized this house. I couldn't just break into the house. So I decided to pretend to be a flower delivery person. I got in my car, bought a bouquet, signed the card, "For Anne with Love," and drove to Paul and Meryl's house. I parked near the manicured lawn, put on dark glasses and a cap in case Paul answers the door, and took the flowers. Luckily, Meryl was the only one home. I introduced myself as a flower delivery person, and held it out to the astonished woman. When Meryl saw the card, her face twisted with anger. She said I had the wrong address and slammed the door right in my face. Next, I heard her yelling at the man on the phone that for some reason he had ordered delivery to their address in the name of his dead lover. So Meryl knew exactly who Paul was cheating on her with, just like she knew that Anne was dead. Now I had 2 new suspects. 2 blondes who hated Anne. But how could I figure out which of the 2 was responsible for the murder? I got home and started thinking about what to do next. My thoughts were interrupted by a message from Tom on Anne's profile. He was happy to get her message because he was very worried about her missing. I immediately set up the meeting at my house. He said he'd be here in an hour, and he never even asked for the address, so he already knew where to go. I decided to prepare for the meeting with this stranger. I left a voicemail for my neighbor Archie, telling him to call the cops if he doesn't hear from me in 2 hours. As soon as I sent the message, I saw someone watching me through the window. Hey! I ran out into the yard and saw the back of a woman climbing over my fence. I grabbed her leg, trying to pull her down to the ground, but she deftly stuck a gas can in my face. I got all dizzy and fell down. I was brought back to consciousness by ammonia. Archie and Tom were standing over me. I recognized Tom from his profile picture in the messenger. Both were frightened and said they had already called an ambulance and the police. And no, Tom didn't know about Anne's death. He started telling the whole truth about his relationship with Anne. Turns out he works for an escort service, makes single women feel good about themselves. I never would have thought that Anne, who already had such a tumultuous personal life, could be interested in a man of this type. But he corrected me. It was not her who contacted him. His services were ordered by someone named Natalie, who introduced herself as Anne's sister. She told him that her sister was bored after she divorced her husband, that she was deeply depressed and had broken off all contact with her family. Natalie asked Tom to have a brief affair with her sister to take her mind off her sad thoughts. Natalie also asked him to find out all the details of Anne's life, where she lives, and whom she dates. That totally explained who this mysterious Tom was. But it didn't explain what sister? My dear Anne had no brothers or sisters. I asked Tom to show us photos and messages from Natalia, and he showed Archie and me a slim blue-eyed blonde. It was Meryl, Paul's wife. Why the hell would she order an escort for her husband's lover? Within an hour, Meryl was at the police station. Her car had been detained not far from my house, and they found the pepper spray she used to attack me. My flower delivery idea was a failure. Meryl saw me and Anne's picture on social media. She also already knew that Tom got text messages from someone on Anne's behalf, and when I showed up on her doorstep, she thought I'd guessed who the murderer was. So Meryl decided to get rid of me too. The betrayed wife made a confession. She was the one who killed Anne. Tom was hired specifically to find out where the husband's lover lives, and whether he continues to cheat. When it turned out that the relationship was still going on, Meryl decided to take revenge. She came over to our house, waited until we were asleep, and climbed in through the open kitchen window on the first floor. She planned to kill with a gun, thinking Anne lives alone. But when she saw me and realized I'd hear the gunshot, she chose a knife. Meryl got 15 years behind bars for Anne's murder. Although my friend had a foul love game, she never deserved to die. This story is another reminder that lies always come to the surface, and sometimes even kill.